Chapter 600. The kings had mixed feelings about this. Even though they knew that this was the only candidate that Tyrrhenus had chosen to inherit the Alterac kingdom. Many of the kings already had an instinctive resistance when they heard about this, and they had a bad preconceived impression of him. However, when Presto stood up, everyone had a feeling that this man was someone who could be trusted by everyone under any circumstances, and was also someone who deserved to be trusted and respected. Amidst the slightly confused atmosphere, a few gasps of admiration rang out at the same time. If only Arthas had him like this. If only Tanreed could be like him. William still has room to improve. If it was Tyrrhenus, they could say that he was biased. However, the praises came from Daelin and Lang, two kings who had different political views from Tyrrhenus. One had to admit that this lord was very charismatic. On the other side, Antonidas secretly injected arcane power into the blood vessels in his eyeballs. This was a very risky thing to do. If the arcane power went out of control, he would be blinded on the spot. The uneasiness in his heart made him do this. Damn it. Even this didn't work. In the vision created by the arcane power, the figure standing in the middle of the hall was like a giant black hole, sucking in all light and heat. It was as if even the eyes that were filled with magic were going to be sucked into it. No, it wasn't just as if. The power that came from the mysterious domain was using an unparalleled suction force to suck Dalaran's eyeballs out of his eye sockets. Antonidas could only feel his consciousness starting to collapse. Slap. With the last of his consciousness, Antonidas slapped his old face. The crisp sound attracted the attention of all the kings and representatives. Oh, sorry, there's a mosquito. Antonidas hurriedly lowered his head. He still felt that the mysterious lord was up to no good, but he had no evidence at all. Should he tell the kings in front of everyone, Lord Presto has a divine artifact on him, and he stopped me from looking at him? Can you ask him to take that divine artifact down so that I can use my arcane power to look at his body? If he dared to do this, he must be crazy. Who was Davar Presto? He was the only one with the bloodline of the Alterac royal family, and was destined to inherit the Alterac kingdom. As long as he went through the motions, he would be able to sit on the empty throne and be on equal footing with the other 9 kings and representatives. Antonidas decided to remain silent. Tyrrhenus cleared his throat and said, Lord Presto, this is no longer the time when the countries are isolated from each other. The invasion of the Horde was cruel and terrifying, but it also brought about a great unity among the 4 races that had not been seen in the past 3,000 years. As the leader of the Rotterdam Kingdom Alliance, I think as an elder, I hope that you can introduce yourself to the kings and tell them how you want to get along with the various allies in the future. King Tyrrhenus stroked his bearded chin in satisfaction. He was looking forward to the debut of the lord who had never disappointed him. In his eyes, Lord Presto was perfect. Presto raised his head and stared at the sky with his eyes that were as deep as the night. War is cruel. Just this sentence, just this opening that was full of masculine charm, caused a silent uproar among the kings. For this terrible war, the alliance has sacrificed too much. The fertile farmland has been turned into scorched earth. Millions of farmers became soldiers and sacrificed their lives on that great battlefield. Now the war is over, but all of us in the alliance must work together to rebuild this continent, feed the people, and bring life back to the land. I saw a report that made my heart ache. The Alterac kingdom is less than half of what it was before the war. But just to the west of the Alterac kingdom, the fertile silver pine forest that originally belonged to Guinevere and Rotterdam has been turned into scorched earth that cannot be cultivated for many years due to the infernal weapons. When Presto said this, Duque's eyebrows twitched. This blame is on me? Presto did not notice, or perhaps he noticed but ignored Duke's reaction. He continued, in the east, the few highlands of Arthi were burned by the dragon breath of the Red Dragon army that belonged to the Horde's camp. In the throne room, Salash Trollbane's face twitched in pain. It doesn't take much imagination to predict that if we don't change everything, hundreds of thousands of people will die of famine next year. What a sad thing it is. Lord Presto's passionate voice quickly infected all the kings. Even the kings who were already aware of this felt the same way. If I become the king of Alterac to make up for the mistakes Alterac made in the war, and to make up for the relationship with the surrounding countries, I will only choose to keep the farmland around Stambrad, because this small amount of farmland is enough to feed 60,000 Alterac citizens. Briar and Caer Darren were loaned to Rotterdam, Hillsbrad Plains were loaned to Gilness, Rotterdam Mill Plains were loaned to Dalaran, and Terran Mill and South Shore Town were loaned to Stormguard. Each place will be rented unconditionally for 20 years. As soon as he said this, the kings were shocked. This was so generous. Although these lands originally belonged to the Bara family, and although he was also the king that Tarina supported, he was really willing to give them away? Aurelia giggled and said to Duque through the whisper of the wind, "Duque, why do I feel like he's more generous than you?" "Ah." Duque replied with a sentence that could do anything. On the other side, the kings of the 4 countries were moved. Some of them were part of the deal, but some were added by Lord Presto himself. Tarina's didn't want Briar and Caer Darren at this time to avoid looking too unsightly. Everyone knew that the so-called loan, it was easy to not return it after borrowing it. There were many such things in the history of Azeroth. After thinking for a while, Tarina spoke. "Thank you for your generosity, Presto Lord. But this is not a good precedent, so please forgive Lord Darren for rejecting your kindness." But Tarina changed the topic and said to Salas, "I think Rapid Hold needs Alterac's selfless help more than any other member of the Alliance. If King Trollbane doesn't object, then let's sign the loan contract under the witness of the Alliance." Chapter 601. Tarina's was very smart. He let Trollbane, who was originally just a passerby, take the blame. Did Salas have a choice? He immediately understood what Tarina's was trying to do. Isn't Riptide Stronghold in need of food? Then start with this first. Otherwise, if they don't want it, don't expect to have food next year. What else could he say? Salas could only nod bitterly. Then I thank you on behalf of the people of Stromgarde. But it won't take as long as 20 years. At this time, Salas suddenly met Xeon's reproachful gaze. He had to change his words. "Alright then, Stromgarde will accept it. As long as Alterac asks, we will return the land next year." Now it was obvious that they were saying, "Do you dare to take the land if they are willing to give it to you?" With Salas as the first target, would the other kingdoms be far behind? Daelin, Magni, Kudrin, Kael, these kings and representatives who had no need for Alterac's land all frowned. On the surface, everything seemed to be going according to the rules. Anyone with a discerning eye would immediately realize that this was actually 3 rogue kingdoms pulling a kingdom that had no choice but to submit. In the name of justice and cooperation, this was the cruelest way to divide up a weak kingdom like Alterac. Almost every king and representative who did not participate could not help but ask themselves, is this the kind of alliance our kingdom wants? At this time, Lord Presto suddenly bowed deeply. "I am impressed by the greatness of Lord Darren. But, Your Majesty, you may not think for yourself, but I hope you can think for the people of Silverpine Forest who have lost their land. How about this? Your Majesty's beloved daughter, Princess Kalia, is the most beautiful person in the world. If I ascend the throne, please allow me to propose to Princess Kalia with Briar and Cael Darren as betrothal gifts." A single stone caused 1,000 ripples. The other kingdoms who were still a little suspicious finally saw Tarina's moves. First, he used real or fake evidence to get rid of Duke Barav, the most powerful person in Alterac. Then he supported a real puppet to take over. Finally, he used a royal marriage to solidify their friendship and alliance. Of course, 10 or 20 years later, if this King Presto accidentally died, then the little prince with Menethil's royal blood would become king. What was annexation? This was annexation. Humph. Daelin and Magni snorted coldly. Kudrin and Gerben didn't know that much, but when they saw Magni's cold snort, they also followed suit. It sounded like a humming duet. Tarina's was embarrassed to be sneered at by the 4 kings. However, Brill and Caer Darren were 2 super fertile lands. The show could only go on. Tarina's pretended not to hear and put on the face of a kind elder. "If Kalia doesn't object. I'm sorry, I'm a father before I'm a king. I need my daughter's approval." Of course. Presto bowed deeply again. The kings did not have to wait for long. Princess Kalia, who had probably been waiting for a long time, arrived. After not seeing her for a long time, Princess Kalia had become even more beautiful. A 16-year-old girl was at the golden age of beauty, starting to transform from a young girl to a mature woman. Perhaps it was an illusion, but Princess Kalia seemed to have grown a little taller. She looked even taller, and she easily wore this pure white lace dress that looked like a wedding dress. She had a head of brilliant golden hair, which looked dreamy under the light muslin draped over her head. Her jade-white skin was nurtured by the water of Lake Lord Emir. Only this white veil made from moon cloth could compare to her skin. This was a compliment, and it was also a fact. In this era of handicrafts, unless one could get their hands on the legendary Devil's Cloth, the moon cloth that was purified by the night elves' moon well water would have the whiteness and smoothness of white snowflakes. Princess Kalia's skin had reached this stage, and her beauty had risen to the level of a work of art. The jade-like face under the white veil seemed to have matured a little, but the aura of a young girl still dominated. Looking down, the pair of breasts that were not small to begin with seemed to have grown a little. Although this size was slightly smaller than Aurelia's, who could say for sure that Princess Kalia would not have the legendary second puberty? Looking down, it was clear that her waspy waist had gone through the torture of the waist corset. From a distance, it already looked like a matchstick. Under her slender waist was a gorgeous pleated gauze dress that looked like a blooming white peony. Princess Kalia looked like a beautiful bride today. While the kings were marveling at Princess Kalia's beauty, they were all secretly cursing Tyrrhena's tricks. On the other side, Lord Presto had already walked forward, knelt on one knee and took out a gift from his space storage bag. This world's most beautiful rose, for the world's most beautiful you. Countless kings exclaimed. It was a very beautiful rose made of ice crystals. They had no idea how this ice rose, which looked cold from afar, was made. Under everyone's gaze, the rose reflected the most psychedelic and moving rainbow colors under the sunlight that shone through the huge glass window. Beautiful beyond compare. Mesmerizing and dazzling. No girl who was in love for the first time would not like this kind of special gift that was so dazzling and beautiful that it could not be described with words. Unless, this girl had seen better with her own eyes. Ah, Princess Kalia looked very apologetic and then she yawned. Yes, a yawn. A yawn that symbolized boredom and contempt. A yawn that made Lord de War Presto confused, and made King Tyrrhenus suddenly feel that something was wrong. King Tyrrhenus suddenly understood why. Kalia was a good and obedient child. She knew her fate from a young age and would never dare to resist his will. But the other's gift was not good enough, and he could not force Kalia to force herself to admit that this was the best gift in the world, right? Damn it. At this moment, Tyrrhenus felt like killing someone. I'm sorry, Lord Presto. Although I would like to say that your rose is the most beautiful in the world, I cannot lie as a believer of the holy light. As she said this, Kalia took out what looked like an ice rose from her space storage bag. Under the dazzling sunlight, every single ice rose petal was clearly visible. Layer upon layer, they formed a blooming rose. Not only that, but there was a faint flame flowing between the cold petals and petals, flickering. Just this dreamlike appearance alone caused the kings to exclaim in surprise. Presto was stunned. Tyrrhena's was stunned. Many kings who had not seen this before were stunned. Chapter 602. If Lord Presto's gift to Princess Kalia was a work of art, then what Princess Kalia brought out now was a masterpiece that surpassed the realm of art. Now, what Princess Kalia had brought out was a masterpiece that surpassed the realm of art. A godly masterpiece. It was a god-level masterpiece. When the kings could not help but exclaim in admiration, King Tyrrhenus slapped his forehead. He could not believe his eyes. If Presto had given a more exquisite gift, it would have been acceptable. Why did he have to give her a rose? If Presto had given her a more exquisite gift, it would have been acceptable. Why did he have to give her a rose? Was he not looking for trouble? With Duke's incomparably perfect magic rose as an example, any lesser rose would be a disgrace that would be thrown into the endless sea. Goss, who stood behind Lang, had been squinting ever since he entered the throne room, as if he did not care about anything in the world. However, when he saw the magic rose made of ice and fire magic, he said, "Not bad." This comment made his other three companions look at him. After all, he did not care about all the magic of the elves and humans in the world. But now, Duque's rose was worthy of his not bad comment? Tyrrhena's regretted giving Kalia the best space storage bag. That thing could stop the time of non-living things. But it was too late. Lord Presto's face finally lost his composure. He could hear the whispers from the thrones around him. Sigh, why did he have to compete with Duque, who looks like a morning star wizard, but is actually more skillful than a breaking dawn wizard? This first impression is terrible. It's fine, it's just a bet. Turning back is not a given. Some kings discussed, some laughed coldly. But for the first time, Duque felt the malice from Presto. Duque's troubles did not stop there. The whispers of the great demon king came from the wind. Duque, so you gave the beautiful Princess Kalia such a beautiful rose. I've learned something new. Be good, stop fooling around. There's nothing between me and Princess Kalia. I'm not messing around. I'm just calmly telling you that this ranger, Aurelia Windrunner, is a little jealous. Well, the amount of vinegar there is about the same size as the Wind Lake. Hey. A wind lake with a diameter of more than 10 kilometers? So jealous? You call this calm? You call this xiao? Just a mere only? Is it worth it? Duque turned his head back bitterly, but he caught a glimpse of Aurelia's sly smile from the corner of his eyes. Of course it's not worth it for the small matter before, but I'm going to be jealous for the big matter later. Don't ask me why I know. It's just a woman's intuition. On the other side, the proposal drama had already reached its climax. Presto's first offering was undoubtedly a failure. This Sir Lord's talent and knowledge were superior to all the other kings present. He knelt down resolutely on one knee. Because of his stature, even if he knelt down, he was still not much shorter than Kalia. This made Princess Kalia very uncomfortable. Almost subconsciously she took a step back. Presto seemed to have activated his Casanova mode, directly using poetry to praise Kalia's beauty, already declaring his love for the princess. Duque's translation device could not completely translate Presto's poems. Seeing Tarina's, Xian, Salas, and Lang, who had a high standard in poetry, all showed an intoxicated expression, one could imagine how good this mysterious Sir Lord's literary skills were. Before Duque's transmigration, he was a super strong person who was proficient in everything, including the 3-character classic, 5-character verse, 7-character quatrains, 8-character essay, tang poetry, song poetry, etc. Unfortunately, Kalia's reaction was like a stone sinking into the ocean. For some reason, if it were any other princess or noble girl, they would definitely have fallen for these sweet words on the spot. Princess Kalia, who was famous for her weak personality, seemed to have eaten a weight of steel at this moment, and just did not buy it. Why do I feel that the atmosphere is a little miserable and cold? My balls hurt? Tarina's also noticed something was wrong. After Presto finished reciting a poem, he had to interrupt. My child Kalia, such an outstanding young man. Not only is he of noble birth, but he is also extremely kind and wise. A young man like Davar Presto is a rare talent that only appears once in 1,000 years. He is different from those so-called heroes of unknown origins. Yes, Duque was unjustly implicated. Kalia held onto the hem of her dress with both hands, pursing her lips and not saying a word. Tarina's was at his wits' end. They had clearly agreed on this during dinner last night, and Kalia had accepted her fate. Why did she change her mind now? He had to make a big move. Lord Presto is the man who will soon become the king of Alterac. Only when he ascends to the throne can he ensure the peace of the Lordaeron Continent Alliance, and that hundreds of thousands of people will not starve to death in the coming year. Such an outstanding man, child, what are you hesitating for? You should know that there are not many men in this world who are worthy of you. At this moment, Princess Kalia's eyes were clearly filled with tears. But she still did not speak. Tarina's was also anxious and simply announced, I'm sorry everyone, my child seems to be a little too excited. As a father, I will agree to Lord Presto's proposal on her behalf. Then, since today is the day of victory for the Alliance, let us celebrate His Majesty Presto's ascension to the throne, and his engagement to my daughter Kalia. Alright, I'll ask you one last time. Regarding their matter, who agrees and who disagrees? It had to be said that the wedding customs of Azeroth were very similar to the Western wedding customs of Duque's pre-transmigration world. Before the ceremony, the priest would symbolically ask, who disagrees with the marriage between the bride and the groom? In 99% of the cases, this was just **T to go through the motions. But today, at this moment, that 1 in 10,000 chance had appeared. Kalia spoke again, and her words were earth-shattering. It was as if she had mustered every drop of courage in her body, and her voice was clearly trembling, as if she was about to cry. Esteemed father, can I not marry Presto? Silence. Dead silence. Everyone was dead silent. What was going on? Not only were the faces of the kings very interesting, even Presto's face looked as if it had been smeared with something called a joke. It was very interesting. Tarina's had painstakingly built up his forces, secretly suppressed Barav and put on a big show. Wasn't it all to help Presto rise to power, and then use the marriage to control Alterac? Chapter 603. Now, the most important thing was that Princess Kalia was rebelling against him. At this moment, many kings were laughing in their hearts. As the saying goes, if you are too smart, you will end up hurting yourself. Wasn't this like shooting yourself in the foot? It was very rude to laugh at this time. But it was a big mistake to expect the impatient dwarves to be polite. Wahahaha. Ah. Tarina's, your daughter doesn't even want to marry. Why are you still forcing her? The shameless Magni and Kudrin, the two distant relatives, hugged their bellies and laughed wildly. Then the great craftsman Jurban also let out a shrill laugh unique to dwarves. Countless veins popped out on Tarina's forehead, and his old face swelled to the color of a pig's liver. He could no longer control himself, and his voice became extremely sharp. Kalia, this is not the time for you to throw a tantrum. As a member of the Menethil royal family, your marriage has been destined to serve the country from the start. Let me tell you, you must marry Presto. Whether you like it or not, you will marry him. You can only marry him in this life and not any other man. Kalia was so wrong that she burst into tears. In the next second, Kalia burst out with an incomparably explosive statement. Duque, what are you waiting for? Have you forgotten what you promised me? Suddenly, the three unscrupulous dwarves stopped laughing. Suddenly, all the other kings and representatives focused their strange gazes on Duque, who had been pretending to be a passerby ever since the Bara family left. Suddenly, Duke was pushed to the top of the waves by Kalia's words. Aha. Wait. Something was wrong. That's right, Duke was ready to make his move. He had waited for so long just so that when Tarina's drama reached its climax, he would kick Tarina's from the clouds of luck he had been dreaming of and send him straight to hell. The problem was, in Duque's plan, Princess Kalia was not part of it. No, it should be said that helping the princess out of her predicament was just a convenience. That night, Duque did it purely because the system elf had told him that Princess Kalia is looking at you from the balcony of the palace, so Duque wanted to give Tarina's a hard time. Now, because of Princess Kalia's words, the kings interpreted that the princess had an affair with Duque. If that was the case, everything could be explained. Why wasn't Princess Presto tempted by the marshal at all? Why was the princess prepared to counterattack with Duque's magic rose when Presto took out the ice rose sculpture? Why did the meek princess dare to go against the will of King Tarinas? It was all because they had Duque as their backer. Even if the kings were not shameless at this moment, everyone's soul of gossip began to awaken, and it began to burn fiercely. Duque was embarrassed. Especially when he felt Aurelia's gaze on him, he finally understood why Aurelia had said that her jealousy was as big as Fengxing Lake. How could it not be big? His lover was entangled with the princess of the strongest human kingdom. If it was true love, maybe Aurelia would let him go. But it was a melodramatic entanglement without any feelings. It could only be used by bards to write poems and sing plays, but it was actually useless. Ahem. Legolas coughed softly. Ugh, why did it have to be time to go on stage? Duque looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, speechlessly leaving a crocodile tear made of air. At this moment, Duque was possessed by Best Actor. At this moment, Duque was holding a non-existent little golden man in his left hand. He was like an actor who was about to step onto the podium and say that he had won the Best Actor award. He slowly stood up, and Duke's voice, which was excessively young but familiar to all kings, sounded again. I'm sorry, Your Majesty Menethil. I firmly oppose Her Highness Kalia marrying the Lord of Presto. Wow! The two dwarven kings exclaimed. Explosive. Too explosive. Were they going to stage a scene where the future king of Alterax's love was snatched away? Would this be the victory of a young couple who had pledged themselves to each other? Or would it end with the complete victory of Tarinas, the old king who represented the evil forces? The king's spirit of gossip was burning brighter and brighter. What is your reason? Tarinas said through gritted teeth. First, please allow me and my servant to present Princess Kalia with a few gifts. Tarinas nodded in the end. He could see the joy in his daughter's expression. But he still did not understand why the situation had changed so drastically. Why was Duke still stubbornly fighting with him for the sake of the Bara family's daughter? But in the next moment, he seemed to be on good terms with his daughter and seemed to want to recognize him as his father-in-law. What about Davar Pristo, the perfect chess piece? Duque left the stage, followed by Legolas, Sala, Goss, and the bronze-skinned elf. The kings had been wondering about this strange combination ever since Lang and Anduin brought them in. After all, the people they brought in were basically their trusted aides, such as Grand Dukes and so on. Only Lang and Anduin had unfamiliar guards. Duque brought a few elven guards with him. This combination was as strange as it could get. Of course, the one who was even more shocked was the Lord of Presto. He seemed to have foreseen that Duque's appearance was a slap to his face. No matter how well-mannered he was, he would not hold back his hostility towards Duque. Duque glared back at him. However, Duque paid more attention to Princess Kalia. Duque, are you finally willing to stand up? Princess Kalia bit her lip, and unconsciously played with her fingers on her abdomen. Yes, I'm here as promised, Duque answered confidently. You won't disappoint me, right? Of course not. The two of them seemed to be speaking in riddles, which made the kings even more anxious. Duque, show old Tarinas what tricks you have. Mag's jeering made Tarina's face turn even darker. At this time, Duque had already arrived between Kalia and the Lord of Presto. He directly turned his back to the Lord of Presto, who had already stood up. From Kalia's perspective, the shadow of the taller and bullier Pristo's body was enough to cover the whole of Duque. Duque ignored her and instead stepped forward to hold Princess Kalia's hand tightly. He then took a deep breath and shouted to Tirinas, "The reason I object to their union is, Lord Pristo is the wing of death." As soon as he finished speaking, Duque pulled Princess Kalia and flew out with flash. Almost at the same time, the brightest light shone behind them. Chapter 604. What? Since ancient times, there was no classic romance film without a love triangle. But wasn't the style changing too quickly? Even if it was to steal someone's love and turn it into hatred, shouldn't two men draw a line and set a date before dueling? Why did they suddenly attack? How did a romance film suddenly turn into a horror film? The four guards beside Duque, who seemed to be here to deliver gifts, suddenly opened the box, and a strong flash burst out from the box. The light from these flash bombs was controlled by the funnel-like reflective shield, and all of them shot at Lord Pristo's face, blinding him for at least a moment. Half of the kings were dumbfounded. Why was it half? Because the other half of the kings and their followers who were on good terms with Duque all heard Aurelia's anxious whisper of wind before they attacked. Danger. Pristo is the wings of death. This sentence was stuck half a second before Duque finished speaking. Dalin, Magni, Kale, and the others were very good at fighting. For these fellows who had stepped into the realm of heroes, half a second was enough. Almost at the same time, Dalin pulled out his machete, Magni and the Muradin brothers activated Avatar, and Kale, waved his hand to cover himself with 3 magic shields, not to mention Lang and Andoin, who were already prepared. Duque's appearance itself was the biggest signal. Almost at the moment when Duque said the words, "Wings of Death," Aurelia had already grabbed Lang's collar with one hand and Andoin with the other. With the help of the power of Storm, they rushed out of the throne room in less than half a second. In the arena, the most crucial arena, the four fellows who had deliberately changed their appearances had finally revealed their true forms. The first was Sala, the elven druid who had her eyes closed all this time. When she suddenly opened her eyes, 2 extremely strange rays of light shot out from her eyes, directly into Lord Presto's body. Lord Presto's tall and sturdy body trembled on the spot. On the other side was Legolas. In a thousandth of a second, the standard high elf eyes turned the color of molten gold, and 2 vertical pupils that resembled lava balls appeared. Slender red scales appeared on her forehead like lightning. The back of his head, which was originally empty, had many hard, long and sharp horns as if by magic. Her robe suddenly opened up, revealing a large piece of thick red scale armor. His arms suddenly lengthened and thickened, and a pair of incomparably sharp claws leapt out. He struck out with both his claws at Presto, who was in the middle of the battlefield. Not only her but the other 2 guards also attacked at the same time. The bronze-skinned guy held a long-handled warhammer with a head like a crab's leg, and smashed it down. The blue-haired one suddenly pulled out a magnificent staff, and with a wave of his hand, a huge blue light shield appeared in front of all the kings. Duque had just carried Princess Kalia, who had turned pale, into a standard princess carry, and hid within the protection of the light shield. Everything actually happened in half a second. However, the situation changed too quickly, and no one could really control the situation. At this moment, the dumbfounded Lord Presto, or rather, the Wing of Death, Nisario, who had been ambushed, was finally hit. At the last moment, at the most critical moment when he was about to be killed, Nisario suddenly came to his senses. Countless years of accumulated combat experience and combat instincts allowed him to twist his body. This allowed him to avoid the greatest crisis of death. He had only avoided instant death. After all, the ones who ambushed him were the life-giver Alexstrasza, the Queen of Dreams Isra, the King of Time Nosdormu, and the King of Magic Maligos, the 4 dragon aspects that had recovered their strength. It had to be said that Nisario's ultimate transformation spell was at the peak of perfection. He completely suppressed his power and transformed into a human that no one had seen before, isolating all possible leakage of the dragon aura and even soul fluctuations. Apart from refusing to accept any magical detection, even if Alexstrasza and Isra were to examine him in front of him, they would not be able to detect that he was the Wing of Death. Unfortunately, from the moment he heard the name de War Presto, the evil transmigrator Duque already knew that he was Nisario. That's right, Nisario had reached the limit of this disguise game, but Duque had cheated. He directly bypassed all the appearances and processes and reached the result. It was not that Nisario was not alert to Duque's 4 guards, but the problem was that the 4 Dragon Kings had used the same ultimate transformation spell under Duque's instigation. They had changed their appearance and aura. In the eyes of all the mortals, the four of them were just four blonde high elves. Unless Nesario dared to use Antonida's level of detection magic in front of everyone, he would never be able to tell that the four of them had used almost the same magic that he had used to reject detection. Hesitation, disbelief, and Nesario's pride in his ability to conceal himself had finally caused him to be ambushed. That's right. He had escaped the fate of being killed in seconds. This did not mean that he had escaped the sneak attack of the four dragon kings. Maligo's magic shield was not just for protection. This magic also turned into thousands of tiny magic needles on the ground at the same time, piercing into Nesario's legs. If Nesario was a standard dragon, this bit of damage would not even be able to pierce through his dragon skin. The problem was that he was in the human form with the lowest defense. In an instant, countless needle-sized lines of blood appeared on his legs. Nozdormu's warhammer smashed into Nesario's tilted head. He did not use all of his strength, but 70% of its power caused half of Nesario's head to cave in slightly from the corner of his left eyebrow to his temple. The most serious injury that Nesario suffered was Alexstrasza's claws. One of her claws tore apart the right side of his lower abdomen. The other claw completely penetrated his left lung, and 5 sharp dragon claws directly came out of his left chest. Dripping blood stained the 5 sharp claws. If Nesario was just a slightly stronger mortal creature, such an injury would be enough to put him on the countdown to death. But he was not. He was the wing of death Nesario, the former guardian of the earth. Since the ancient war 10,000 years ago, it was once the strongest giant dragon. Roar. At the same time, several loud dragon roars exploded in the throne room. Among them, Nethario's shrill and tragic roar was the most terrifying. Chapter 605. Several ferocious dragon roars reverberated through the air, causing every piece of glass in the throne room to shatter. The shards of glass shot out along with the violent air currents, killing and injuring many attendants and guards outside. This was not a dragon's breath, nor was it a bomb, but it was many times more terrifying than a mage's pyroblast. The long roars penetrated the deepest part of everyone's soul, reminding them of a legend that had almost been completely forgotten by the world. 10,000 years ago, that was the era of the dragons. Every creature that walked on the ground could be the prey of the dragons. Everything in the mortal world had to crawl under the wings of the dragons, afraid that they would attract the attention of the dragons and get themselves killed. Outside the throne room, there was still the sound of drums and music. The people who were celebrating the day of triumph did not disperse even after the triumphant procession had left the main road and started to parade around the city. This was because the kingdom of Lordaeron had also invited a large number of performers, strange clowns, costume dancers, and all kinds of bands. Just a few seconds ago, even though it was early winter, the entire Lordaeron city was still immersed in a warm atmosphere. At this moment, the terrifying dragon roar that suddenly appeared broke all of this. The veterans who had just retreated from the front lines were fine. After facing the Crimson Dragon Legion's attacks day and night, almost all of them had developed a strong heart. The citizens of Lordaeron who had never seen a dragon were in big trouble. Because of fear, many people's hearts contracted due to excessive nervousness. Under sudden cardiac arrest, blood supply temporarily stopped, and everything in their field of vision turned pitch black. Under extreme fear, nearly 30% of them fainted just like that. Some unlucky people even fell from the balcony. They could not be blamed. The shocking dragon might of the 5 great dragon kings was not something mortals could resist. For a moment, the entire Lordaeron city was in a mess. In fact, the throne room was also in a mess. Under the gaze of all the kings, the tall and burly Davar Priester suddenly released a flaming shockwave. This was not a simple shockwave. It contained extremely high energy, and the other dragon kings did not dare to face it head-on. Or rather, which of these ultimate Azeroth masters who had lived for countless years did not have a few trump cards that could save their lives? He was unable to determine what this move was all about. He could only be sure that this was a terrifying skill that even the 4 great dragon kings could only avoid. After shaking off Alexstrasza and Nozdormu, he began to transform. In front of every single king, Presto's head turned into a miniature pitch-black dragon head. A pair of wings grew larger and larger on his back, while his limbs grew thicker and thicker. His once white and smooth skin was now covered in a layer of cuticle. Not only him but the other 4 dragon kings also transformed at the same time. It grew larger and larger, more and more terrifying. In just a few moments, it had surpassed the range that a human's field of vision could accommodate at close range. It was foreseeable that in less than 5 seconds, the entire magnificent throne room would be burst apart by the 5 terrifyingly large ancient dragons. Let's go. It was unknown how Duque cast the spell, but the walls in the 4 directions of the hall were suddenly pierced by 4 huge icicles. These 4 completely hollow icicles were like a giant ice slide that led straight to the royal garden outside the hall. Dalen, Magni, and the rest jumped into the ice slide without hesitation and escaped smoothly. Jean, Salas, and Antonidas hesitated for a moment before sliding out with their people. Only Tyrrhenus, things had changed too quickly. Even now he still could not believe his eyes. Oh my God! What have I done? That's right, the nobles in the country were seething with resentment. Their territories had been burned to the ground, and the capital had almost been conquered. They had formed the alliance, but they did not have the kind of influence that they had. In order to make up for all this, Tyrrhenus did not hesitate to offend the other alliance to take over Alterac. He even risked opposition from half of the alliance to use his authority as the alliance master to impeach an important minister of another country who had never truly betrayed the alliance. And then what did he gain? His beloved daughter did not listen to him, and actually joined forces with Duque, whom he had failed to recruit. The lord that he trusted completely and was willing to promote as the king of Alterac was actually the infamous Deathwing Nesario, who was proven to be the one who caused the Red Dragon army to side with the orcs. That was Neltharion. For tens of thousands of years, he had caused countless deaths and destruction, and destroyed countless cities. He was one of the most evil beings in the world of human scholars, historians, and bards on countless occasions. Tyrrhenus could not imagine how the people would react when they found out that they were almost used by Deathwing, and that they had helped Deathwing become the king of Alterac. No. Today's losses might be great. Even if he had to pay a higher price, he had to shut the mouths of the various kings as soon as possible. Otherwise, if he were to be accused of being in cahoots with Deathwing, he would not be able to hold his position as the alliance master. Yes, I am also a victim of Deathwing's scheme. When Tyrrhenus finally completed the great achievement of plan completion, he suddenly realized that the plan he had just completed could be thrown into the gutter. Because the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza hit Nesario with her dragon tail, and when Nesario was about to rise into the sky, the Red Dragon Queen, who did not seem to know Tyrrhenus' suffering, shouted in the human language, "Nesario, your end is here. Don't think that we won't be able to find you just because you have become the Lord of Presto and hide under Menethil's protection." The roar was so loud and clear. At this moment, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians who had gathered in Lordaeron for the victory ceremony all heard it. Wow, King Menethil actually... No one dared to believe their ears, but the behemoth that was almost half the size of a town in the sky did exist. The flames under its wings were like a cloud of fire, and the corrosive liquid that was fanned out when the giant wings flapped was like a drizzle of stars. They were obviously inconspicuous droplets of liquid, but they were extremely corrosive. When these fine droplets were sprinkled on the palace below, they easily corroded the tiles, walls, statues, and ground, not to mention humans. Any creature that came into contact with a little bit of it would be instantly corroded, along with their armor, skin, and muscles. Chapter 606. Just a few flaps of the wings of death had caused the entire Lordaeron palace to fall into destruction. This was the result of Maligos following Duque's instructions to prevent the battle from spreading too far. He tried to use a huge ring-shaped wind wall to lock the battle in the sky above the palace. If not for Maligos, half of Lordaeron would have instantly turned into hell. No, I didn't do it. Tyrrhenus had a mental breakdown. He could not imagine how the people of Lordaeron, or even the entire human world, would scold him after the sun rose tomorrow. In his daze, he seemed to hear countless voices saying, "Look, Tyrrhenus, that blind idiot actually wants to put the most evil black dragon on the noble throne." No, the scepter in Tyrrhenus' hand had already fallen to the ground. He opened his arms and waved them around, completely ignoring the countless pieces of rubble raining down from the top of the throne hall. Suddenly he was held down by Mograine and Abendis, one on the left and one on the right. "Your Majesty, run." It had to be said that the High Lord Mograine was an extremely loyal subject. He did not lack loyalty, courage, or leadership. It was only at this moment that Tyrrhenus suddenly came back to his senses and felt a surge of warmth in his heart. But the next moment, when he realized that he had to rely on Duque's ice slide to escape, he lost control of his emotions again. "No, I don't want to use Duque's things." Yes, he already hated Duque. It was Duque who argued with him. It was Duque who did not let him have it easy. It was Duque who did not inform him that Presto was actually Nesario. Yes, in a sense he had guessed correctly. But that, again, His radiant moon mage guards had become useless because of the Blue Dragon King's absolute control of the surrounding magical elements. Other than Duque, whom Malygos had specially opened the back door for, all the mages in the entire palace had become weak chickens. Mograine and Abendus were not gods, and they did not have the holy light to activate, Holy Shield. Other than Duque, there was no other way out. If you have the ability, don't use it. Mograine and Tiramisu didn't care. They grabbed Tirina's and jumped down. Perhaps because of a certain person's dark heart, this ice skating path was a little thorny. Just as he was about to reach the garden, the great King Tirina's Menethil's robe was torn apart, and he could only scurry away with his bare buttocks. On the other side, the 4 dragon kings that followed Nesario into the sky had already become extremely huge. Their gigantic bodies cast a shadow from the sky that covered 2 to 3 city blocks. Red, green, blue, and bronze, the 4-colored dragon bodies shone brightly under the dazzling sunlight. Each dragon was shrouded in a halo of sunlight. The halos with a holy aura seemed to declare the supreme majesty of the world of Azeroth's guardian dragons. Alexstrasza, who was in the lead, raised her head and stared at the trembling black dragon in the sky with her golden-yellow pupils that were like lava flames. She could clearly see the anger and fear in the eyes of this cunning, cruel, and traitorous black dragon. She was not in a hurry after surrounding her old opponent. She slowly and elegantly spread her huge wings, dispersing all the dust and debris that were brought up when she broke through the roof of the throne hall. Deathwing's condition was already very bad. Due to the serious injury he had suffered in his human form, this injury was directly reflected in his dragon form. One of Nesario's left eyes could no longer open, the left side of his head had a slight sense of collapse, and a horn on the upper left had disappeared. Similarly, there was a huge wound on the left side of his chest and the right side of his abdomen. The scales on that area had all disappeared, the dragon's skin was flipped open, and the muscles were rolled back. One could even see flames that did not belong to him rolling around in the wound. That was the Red Dragon Queen's flame of life. For most creatures it was a great tonic, but for Neltharion, it was the most potent poison. At this moment, Nesario's crazy red eyes no longer had the arrogance of the king of the world. Instead, he had the timidity of a thief who was afraid of being beaten to death after being caught. What? Why are you able to sense my existence? My plan should have been perfect. My disguise should have been perfect. What? Is it really that kid named Duque? Nesario roared in shock and anger. Ha! You underestimate me too much, Nesario. The Bronze Dragon King, Nosdormu, grinned loudly. His mouth, which was made of sand, was not sharp, and looked as ridiculous as a sculpture. However, the power of time that flowed through his mouth was not funny at all. You? Of all the things you shouldn't have done, you shouldn't have become a human. This has reduced the difficulty of peeping into your future. I happen to see all of this. Anyway, Duque had repeatedly told him not to betray him, and even made up this excuse for Nosdormu. Nosdormu went with the flow and pretended to be pretentious. Damn it. How did I bump into it? Nesario felt that he was completely black. He was very clear about the strength of his old brother. Nosdormu would not often peep into the future because it was very laborious and required him to pay some kind of price. He now regarded this as Nosdormu peeking into countless fragments of the future. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack to see what he had done. If this was not black, what was it? Nesario. Repent for your sins. Malygos, who hated Nesario the most, let out the loudest roar of anger since his appearance. When there was no need to protect the weak humans, that was when Malygos would really go all out. It wasn't that Nesario hadn't thought about whether he could take advantage of Malygos not launching a sneak attack this time, and instead covering for the human kings. When he saw Malygos' eyes, which were still filled with anger and hatred, he immediately knew that Malygos had done this because of some agreement. But now Malygos had no scruples. If he used humans as a cover, some people might feel the heartache, but Malygos would definitely not hesitate to kill him along with the ant-like humans below him. Nesario's brain was about to crash. Even when he was at his peak, he couldn't defeat his 4 brothers and sisters who had recovered their strength, let alone him who was already injured. Now he was even more injured. If he hadn't been injured, he wouldn't have had so much time to pretend to be a human and attempt to overthrow the alliance. He looked at the 4 dragon aspects that were in perfect formation, waiting to be slaughtered by the dragon aspects. Nesario was in despair. What should I do? What should I do? Chapter 607. The 5 dragon aspects fought against each other for tens of thousands of years due to the enmity between good and evil. This was a scene that ordinary people might not even get to see once in their lives. If not for the fact that they were worried that it would harm themselves, it would definitely be an extremely relaxing scene for the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians below. Unfortunately, this was not an IMAX movie, and there was no place for the popcorn-eating crowd to sit and watch the show. The battle between the 5 ancient dragon kings in the sky could easily drop anything, such as scales or corrosive secretions from the body of the Dragon of Death. If they were hit or affected, it would be a disaster. For a moment, the entire Lordaeron city was in chaos. Duque had tricked Wings of Death and Tyreenas. If he did not run away, then he would be an idiot. Of course, the situation now was a little tricky, because he was carrying Princess Kalia Menethil in his arms. She was wearing a snow-white gauze dress that looked almost like a wedding gown, and a pair of white jade balls under the protection of a low-cut top trembled under his eyes. Sob, sob, sob. I, Duque, am no longer that little virgin who only fantasized about 10 terabytes romantic action movies. I've eaten meat. Please, princess, don't tempt me, okay? Ever since I lost my moral integrity as Mediv, I haven't been able to maintain it. Who knew that the princess did not seem to hear his thoughts at all? She wrapped her arms around his neck as if to make it easier for Duque. But her breasts were getting closer. Damn it. Damn it. Flash was not a spell that could be used casually. It was a spell that could disintegrate a person into elemental particles and then reassemble them from 20 yards away. Although it was perfect, it would stop when it encountered an obstacle. However, the air was filled with flying rubble, and using Flash would cost him his life in minutes. Duque could only activate his ice shield, blow away the stones that came out of nowhere, and run with the princess in his arms. Duque, you've finally come to pick me up. It's just like what I've seen in my dreams countless times. Wait a minute. What's with this affectionate dialogue? Although you didn't ride a white horse, you saved me from the hands of an evil dragon. You are indeed my destined knight. Although you're not wrong, but I'm really just passing by, you understand? But in every knight and princess novel, there will always be a happy ending, right? What are you going to do next? Father is a prideful person. He said that I'm not allowed to marry anyone except for Presto. If that's the case, I'll definitely be imprisoned in Lordaeron's palace for the rest of my life. Duque shuddered. He crossed a corridor filled with the corpses of guards and quickly turned into a storeroom. He closed the door, not letting Kalia see the guards outside who were scared to death by the dragon's might. As Duque put down Princess's leg, he panted heavily and thought to himself, damn it, I really have to train my body when I go back this time. This was the nth time Duque had sworn to exercise. Please ignore the sentence above. Duque spoke, okay, Princess Kalia, please call me Kalia. The princess was unexpectedly persistent on this matter. At the same time, her arms did not let go of Duque's neck. Their faces were still very close. Okay, Kalia, I understand your situation. Since I promised to give you freedom, I will definitely do it. Duque strived to be a gentleman. Even if he knew from the bottom of his heart that he was just a hypocrite at this moment. A hypocrite is a hypocrite. There were always some beautiful things in the world that people couldn't bear to destroy, such as Princess Kalia's pure beauty. How are you going to give me freedom? Princess Kalia's clear blue eyes showed hope and a smile. Duque quickly said, I've already calculated the extent of damage caused by Deathwing's acid. I need you to provide something that can prove your identity. I will throw it into a ball of acid and fake evidence that you are dead. At the same time, I will open a portal and send you directly to a safe place. Kalia tilted her head. She quickly made a decision. First, she took off her sapphire earrings, then the headdress on her forehead, followed by the sapphire necklace on her chest. Finally, she pulled on the ropes around her waist, and something happened that left Duke dumbfounded. Princess Kalia's tight waistband, along with her gorgeous white muslin dress, was taken off in front of Duque. Of course, it wasn't that there was nothing under the long dress. It was just a white bra that perfectly showed the shape of her chest, white panties and white stockings with suspenders. All of this stunned Duque. This was comparable to the underwear models of Victoria's Secret before Duque traveled to this world. In fact, Princess Kalia's figure was not inferior to those supermodels at all. Duque swallowed his saliva. Oh my god. Princess, don't you know what it means to provoke others into committing a crime? I'm telling you, don't tease me anymore. I don't have very high moral integrity. I might really push you down. 2 seconds later, Duque retreated in defeat. Because he was shocked to find that this dignified Princess Royal of Lordaeron really had no concept of defense. Even though she was shy about the man's gaze in her completely clear eyes, She did not even consider the possibility of being dragged by him to play coquetry. She trusted Duque completely. "Duque, is there anything I can wear?" Duque bared his teeth and threw his mage robe to Kalia from the storage space. Mage robes were good. Most mage robes didn't discriminate between men and women at all. They could just be put on. Kalia quickly put it on. "What do we do now?" "Wait for me to open the door." "Open the door?" Kalia immediately saw that Duque had actually opened a portal in the small storage space. Isn't there only designated places in Lordaeron that can open portals? Kalia was puzzled. Those low-level magic barriers have long been dismantled by Maligos, the king of magic. "Oh, I see." Without saying anything more, Kalia subconsciously hugged Duque again and began her first trip to the portal in her life. 2 minutes later, the captain of the Lordaeron Palace Guards, who was leading a team of 30 royal guards in the palace, frantically looking for Tarina's or Princess Kalia, was pleasantly surprised to see Duque rushing towards him with Princess Kalia in his arms. "Your Highness Kalia." Molev hurried over. "Molev?" The princess let out a cry of surprise. "Duque, give me to him. He is our captain of the palace guards." Chapter 608. Duque breathed heavily and put the princess down. "That's great. I'll leave the princess to you. I still need to make sure His Majesty Lang is safe." Duque did not waste any time and handed the princess over to Molev. "Thank you, Duke Marcus. I'll take care of the princess." However, less than 30 seconds after they separated, something unexpected happened. Boom! A magic bombardment fell from the sky and hit the corridor of the palace. What followed was a terrifying shriek of death. "No!" Molev turned around in horror. He and more than 15 guards had witnessed this tragic scene. Princess Kalia didn't even have the chance to scream before she was hit by the acid of the wings of death. In an instant, not even her bones were left. Molev tried to pull the princess away at the last moment, but all he could do was pull the princess's white dress. "No, no, no, no." Molev was furious. He tried to pull the princess out of the acid that had turned half of his subordinates and the princess into an unknown substance, but he was held back by his subordinates. "Let me go. Let me go. I'm guilty. I'm guilty, the princess is dead. What's the point of me being the captain of the guards? Just let me die." Molev pulled out his sword and wanted to commit suicide. His subordinates stopped him. "No, sir, you are the captain of the guards. You have the duty to report this to His Majesty. Didn't you say that you gave your life to the Menethil royal family? It is his right to decide how you die. You have no right to commit suicide." "No." The captain of the guards, who had been through countless hardships and had always been loyal to the Lordaeron royal family, shed tears of regret. He could not imagine what kind of expression His Majesty Tarina's would have when he heard the news. At the same time, far away in the western wilderness of the southern continent, a beautiful golden-haired girl looked at the vast fields. She took a deep breath of the thick, earthy scent of the winter fields. She puffed out her chest and sucked in her stomach. She tilted her head back and opened her arms, letting the cold wind blow through her hair. She let out a heartfelt gasp of admiration. "Wow, so beautiful. Is this the scenery outside? Is this the air of freedom?" The girl's beautiful blue eyes greedily absorbed everything in her vision into her mind. In the eyes of countless ordinary people, things that were incomparably simple and ordinary were so rare and fresh in the eyes of the young girl. Like a canary that broke free from its cage, she sang and cheered happily in this world. After taking off her luxurious high heels, the young lady stuck her slender and perfect jade-like feet into the ice-cold soil. She kicked away the thin snow that covered the field and used her toes to pick out pieces of black soil. Then, just like that, she danced around the field in the most elegant manner. This beautiful girl was naturally Princess Kalia. Duque used the true mirror image spell to perfectly imitate the princess and let a non-existent magic dummy wear the princess clothes. In the eyes of the world, the beautiful Kalia Menethil was already gone. Duque didn't disturb the excited Kalia. He let her party on the field. Anyone who stayed in a palace that seemed huge but was actually very small, or in a cage for 16 years would feel extremely depressed and depressed. This feeling of spiritual sublimation from breaking free from the cage was something that no outsider could understand. The air of freedom. Because she was too happy. Princess Kalia spun faster and faster. Because the mage robe didn't have any straps, the whole robe was like a long skirt, swaying at high speed. The white stockings and that pair of beautiful legs were not bad. Duque subconsciously covered his nose. Was this a sign that he was going to have a nosebleed? No. I said I won't be a beast. Duque rubbed his eyebrows. Looking at Kalia's delicate and pure face, his restless heart calmed down. What a magical girl. At this time, the crazy Kalia finally realized that she seemed to have lost her composure. She subconsciously lifted the hem of the mage robe like a skirt, and trotted towards Duque. Sorry? I'm too excited. I feel like I can see the outside world. I'm willing to die. Duque smiled sincerely. Kalia, don't joke. Since I promised you freedom, you will naturally have a lot of time to see the world. Kalia suddenly realized something, and her mood became a little down. If I do this, will it bring you and my father a lot of trouble? Besides, when the Rotterdam kingdom was in trouble, I felt really bad for running out alone like this. I'm not in trouble. I've perfectly killed you and Lord Darren. There won't be any evidence that I kidnapped or murdered you. As for your father, His Majesty Tyrrhenus, I want to say that everyone must be responsible for their own actions. Responsible? Kalia widened her eyes, which were so pure that there was not a trace of impurity in them, and blinked. Yes. As the leader of the Lordaeron alliance, after signing the Equal Alliance Treaty, he coveted the alliance's land. This is a true blasphemy to the name of the alliance. Perhaps the Alterac king and nobles are guilty, but the people of Alterac are not. Lordaeron and Alterac are not enemies, but brothers of the same origin. I am ashamed of His Majesty Tyrrhenus for doing this. At this point, Duque lowered her head. I have asked the Blue Dragon King Malygos to ensure the safety of the citizens of Lordaeron as much as possible, but there will always be losses. This is not my fault, nor yours or anyone else's. From the day His Majesty Tyrrhenus coveted Alterac's land and introduced the Wings of Death, Nisario, this was the destined outcome. If I hadn't discovered Nisario early and found the 4 Dragon Kings to kill him, Lordaeron would have been devoured by Nisario. Kalia shuddered. Although she was inexperienced, she could not imagine what would happen to the entire Rotterdam and even the entire alliance if she were to marry Presto. No, if she were to marry Nisario in name. Kalia thought for a while and finally accepted this reality. Then what should I do next? Do I need to hide in your Karazhan first? No, since I promised you freedom, I won't. I will fulfill my promise. Please allow me to introduce you to your companions who will be accompanying you on your adventures around the world in the coming days. Duque bowed elegantly. Then a few women appeared from behind the hill. They were a maid, a ranger, and an armored paladin. Chapter 609. Princess Kalia's sexy little mouth opened into an O shape. Although she had complete trust in Duque, but in her imagination, being able to hide outside the palace under Duque's protection was already the greatest happiness. Who would have thought that there would be something even better than happiness? Duque had actually fulfilled her wish without any discount. The first girl dressed as a maid stepped forward. She gave Kalia a very standard maid's salute. She had short black hair that was parted 3 to 7 times, and a beautiful yet slightly immature face. Although she was dressed in a typical black maid's outfit with white edges, her steps were very vigorous, without the slightest hint of a maid's style. Hello, Princess Kalia, I am Vanessa Van Cleef. I was originally Sir Marcus's exclusive maid, but now my cruel master thinks that I am a hindrance and abandoned me. I request your highness to take me in. Duque facepalmed. This little maid was really worrisome. Kalia was dumbfounded. Abandoned a maid? What is this? Duque smiled bitterly. Don't listen to Vanessa's nonsense. Her father is an important minister under me, and he entrusted her to me. But I found out that she has an excellent talent as a thief. Keeping her by my side as a maid would be a waste of her talent, so it is better to let her go out and gain experience. In a few years, first when she grows up and second when she has experience, I will be of great use to her. That's more like it. Vanessa's little nose was raised to the sky. After saying that, she unexpectedly ignored Duque and grabbed Princess Kalia's hand. Hey, Sister Kalia, I heard that you want to give up your identity as a princess and travel the continent as an ordinary person. Is that true? Of course. Kalia did not hesitate. Then later, to avoid exposing my identity, I will only call you by your name and a pseudonym. Vanessa, who was a little scheming, seized the opportunity. No problem. Kalia didn't know that she had fallen into a trap, and was still very happy because of the other party's kindness. Always hearing the words Your Highness always made her uncomfortable. Duque continued, This ranger is Lilith Windrunner, the youngest sister of the Windrunner family. Although she looked like this, she was actually more than 300 years old. She had the unparalleled talent of the Windrunner family, but before she could step into the realm of heroes, her limelight was stolen by her 3 sisters during the battle at the Dark Portal. In fact, her kill record can be ranked in the top 20 in the Alliance. Kalia's mouth opened wider. Don't underestimate the top 20. It also depended on who was in the top 10. Duque, the publicly acknowledged nemesis of the orcs, was ranked number 1. Below them were the 3 Windrunner sisters and Antonidas, who was active in the Silverpine Forest battlefield. Next was a group of butcher princes. At that time there was Anduin Lothar of Quell, Zarim. And then there was Uther and the others who were known as the 5 Silver Saints after the charge of the 12 horsemen. Below them were High Lord Mograine, Abendis, Dalin Proudmoore, Danath Trollbane, Curdran Wildhammer, and the 3 Bronzebeard brothers of Ironforge. These were fierce men who had shown extraordinary results during the war. If it wasn't for the fact that these guys in front of her were too fierce and left too deep an impression, she would definitely have the title of Alliance Hero. Even so, Lilith managed to occupy the top 20 without anyone noticing. The dignified princess of Lordaeron immediately trotted over like a fan, pulling Lilith's hand and asking questions. After the excitement subsided with great difficulty, Kalia realized that there was a third companion here. Neither she nor Duque minded Kalia's loss of composure. Duque said, "This is Lady Riadaline. She was originally a priest of the Holy Light just like you. However, after the war that just ended she was a little agitated. She then became the disciple of my subordinate, Gavinrad Misfortune, and became a holy knight. She is a very good vanguard. She will also follow you out to gain experience." Kalia's eyes immediately sparkled again. Her pure and unadorned personality easily won Riadaline's favor. Duque also sighed. The 3 companions he had painstakingly arranged this time all had great backgrounds. In the original history, Vanessa would have become a boss. Lilith's original form, Riras, had died, but now she had made a name for herself. The last one, Riadaline, was even more impressive. Duque knew very well that it was the fault of the world shift. Riadaline was originally a high elven priest who believed in the holy light. Her parents were killed by the Amani trolls, and she was raised by her mentor, the high-ranking priest Vonderal. In the war that had just ended, the green-skinned orcs and trolls were like a rampant plague that swept through the entire Longsong forest like a tide. The magnificent armor and shields of the high elves were as thin as paper in front of the brute force of the orcs. The vanguard of the elves was easily destroyed by the muscular army of orcs, ogres, and goblins. Riadaline watched helplessly as her companions were killed by the strong orcs. In this cruel war that resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of elves, Riadaline began to question her unwavering belief in the holy light. Her holy light could only heal the soldiers who retreated from the battlefield, but could not resist the heavy hammers and axes of the orcs, nor could it resist the crazy magic bombardment of the 2-headed ogre mages. If the holy light really protected the high elves, why did the elves lose so badly? At the most critical stage of the war, she even picked up a spiked mace and charged at the orcs. However, the moment she charged, she was easily defeated by an orc laborer who was seen as the weakest. It was only because her comrades dragged her back that she managed to escape. She watched angrily as Orgrim left Kuel Salis with a mocking victory and countless ogres who had been strengthened by the storm altar. The home that the elves were so proud of had become a wasteland burned to ashes. At this time she saw Gavinrad appear. This profession that perfectly combined the holy light and combat deeply touched her heart. In the eyes of the elves in this era, becoming a holy knight was a complete betrayal, but she did not care. She bid farewell to her good friend Theron and became Gavinrad's disciple. With Duque's approval and protection, she became a holy knight trainee. According to Duque, after a few months of learning, it was time for her to train. Only Duque knew, damn it, I tricked the leader of the Blood Elves Blood Knights from the future generation. Thanks to the great offset. In the end, he gave Kalia a magic mask that could turn a little beauty into a village girl, and gave Riadaline a magic locator and communication tool. Everything was done. Alright, I suggest that you travel to Stranglethorn Vale first. Call me if there's any danger. With Kalia's problem solved, Duque turned his attention to the north. Chapter 610. Nethario, are you dead? If you're not dead, just snort. Roar, you're not qualified. You really don't know how to cooperate. Can't you practice the lying dead swordsmanship properly? Are you really going to lie down for me to see? Also, I told you to snort, not roar. Roar? Nethario's voice came from the sky. It was clearly filled with pain and anger. On an empty balcony in Rotterdam, Duque, who looked like a bystander but was actually the culprit, tasted the delicacies left behind by his host without any restraint. Well, the great noble of Rotterdam and his servant were so scared that they hid in the basement. They had no idea that their balcony had been occupied by a shameless traitor. As Duke sat with his legs crossed, eating the snacks and drinking the warm wine, a melodious voice like that of an oriole suddenly came from behind him. Yo, you demolished someone's palace and you still have the nerve to stay here and have fun. Duque glanced back. Yes, the first thing that entered his eyes was the mermaid line on her abdomen that was still incomparably clear on her tights. Above that was naturally the pair of majestic hydral peaks, and further above that was, of course, the beautiful face that seemed to be angry. Hey Aurelia, don't spout nonsense. It was Deathwing who demolished the palace of Rotterdam. If Tyrrhenas isn't satisfied, he can send the palace repair bill to Neltharion. Aurelia was really amused by Duque. She put her hands on her hips and laughed. When she finally finished laughing, she walked over and sat gracefully on the red velvet sofa beside Duque. When she did not show her wild side, Aurelia was a typical noble lady. Unfortunately, the Windrunner's demeanor only lasted for 3 seconds. Her temperament was like the wind in her bones, causing her to quickly reveal her true colors. Her bright smile carried a hint of ridicule. Duque, you're really willing? It's obviously a good opportunity to hide a mistress with the princess, as you said. Disque. Duque righteously recalled Princess Kalia's graceful female body in her underwear and said in a deep voice, "Not every kind of love is called possession. Sometimes appreciating and letting go is also a good way to praise beauty. You can choose not to believe me, but your sister, Lilith, is by Kalia's side." Alright, I'm not really jealous. Don't treat me as such a petty woman, okay? I know you're the real hero of the Alliance. After saying that, Aurelia didn't care if there were still people looking at them and directly gave Duque a hot kiss. Yes, that's more like it. After the kiss, Aurelia returned to the sofa and muttered in a low voice, "Even an old lady like me who has seen through the world is infatuated with you. I'm afraid that little girl Kalia will love you even more after she goes out." What? Duque didn't hear it. Nothing. I'm just talking to myself. Why isn't Nesario dead yet? Aurelia quickly diverted Duque's attention. It's not that simple. Nesario still has a trump card that he hasn't used. Alexstrasza and the others know that too. If there were no external forces involved, under normal circumstances, Nesario would have fallen long ago under the premise that there was not much difference in individual combat power. He wouldn't have to wait for the cataclysm in the future. But, at this moment, heavy footsteps came from the stairs of the room behind the terrace. Duque, you're actually watching the show here? There was no need to ask to know that the loud voice belonged to Lothar. It wasn't just Lothar. Duque was a little surprised to find that it was actually Sasha leading Lang, Daelin, the Bronzebeard brothers, Gerben and Kudrin. Below, a large group of guards from various countries were protecting the house impenetrably. You guys. Duque stood up with a wry smile while looking at Lothar with a slightly reproachful gaze. King Lang took the initiative to speak up. "Don't blame Anduin. I know you asked us to take refuge in the basement for our own good. But, even the mastermind dares to watch the show here while we hide in the basement like clowns and shiver. Isn't that a disgrace to the Alliance warriors?" Duque blinked. "Lang, what you said makes sense. I'm actually speechless." Daelin came up and gently punched Duque's chest with his fist that was as big as a bowl. "You're not kind. You actually didn't inform us that Presto is the wing of death. You even asked us to openly offend old man Tyrrhenas for your sake." Judging from Daelin's completely impolite tone, it was obvious that he no longer took the king of the most powerful human nation, Rotterdam, seriously. Magni also came up and patted the back of Duque's waist, causing Duque to grimace. "Aren't you afraid that one of us will die because of an accident?" Duque angrily retorted, "Bullsh *T, you old man. Even Nesario's dragon breath won't be able to kill you." Magni actually agreed. "Yes, if Nesario stays on the ground and doesn't run, I'll slay a dragon for you to see. Damn it, you're level 10 in bragging and level 10 in irresponsibility, aren't you?" Duque rolled his eyes. "However, it doesn't seem appropriate to let the 5 dragon aspects fight above Rotterdam City," Gerben said worriedly. Aurelia laughed. "Please, ever since Duque discovered Nesario, this cunning black dragon king has never left Rotterdam." Gerben was discouraged. "Alright, I just want to know what will become of the Alliance." Lothar chimed in, "We all want to know." At this moment, everyone looked at Duque. If it were anyone else, they would definitely pee their pants in fear when faced with so many kings. However, Duque was extremely calm. His smile was full of confidence, and his deep black eyes were full of certainty about the future. Under the pressure of a powerful foreign invasion, all countries will naturally unite. However, when the external pressure disappears, the countries will reveal their true colors. They only see the losses of their countries now but not the dangers in the future. Dangers? Gudrun frowned. Duque's gaze turned to the south, seemingly crossing the boundaries of the continent and landing on the huge door in the Crimson Land of Death. I wonder if everyone has noticed that the Door of Darkness cannot be destroyed? All the big shots gasped in unison. Lang said, "You mean, the orcs are not extinct? If an evil warlock who is no less powerful than Ghoul, Dan appears on Draenor, where the orcs live, then it is entirely possible for the Door of Darkness to open again. It's just that I can't predict what will come out the next time it opens." The air suddenly became deathly silent. Duque continued, "The Alliance must purify itself and become more united. Only then can it truly welcome a new life." Chapter 6:11. Fate was a wonderful thing. It had been 2.5 years and Duque had completely forgotten about life on Earth. However, Duque knew very well that without the memory line that extended from the distant Earth to the world of Azeroth and connected to Duque wouldn't have been able to get to this point. The Second War of the Dark Portal was over. The orcs who had slaughtered humans and become cruel and tyrannical because of the demon's blood were destined to withdraw from the stage of history along with the old tribes. It was the same for the Alliance. Although the alliance of 11 countries sounded like a great alliance, everything had to be eliminated in order for everything to be sublimated. It was not an easy task to evolve from the Rotterdam Alliance to the Great Alliance of the later generations. On the large balcony, Duque chatted with several kings who could be considered the absolute core of the alliance in the future. Duque was using his memories that transcended time and space to guide these kings bit by bit using the method of foresight. None of the kings were fools. They had their own beliefs, their own ideals, and their own requirements and hopes for the future of their race. It was not easy to fool them. The goods that Duque brought out were the best parts of the future alliance's operations. Equality, cooperation, mutual exchange, and the formation of emergency response forces were concepts that transcended time and space. These things even deeply fascinated these monarchs and the assistants and ministers standing behind them. If it weren't for the fact that there were still 5 dragon aspects fighting in the sky, they might really think that it was a salon full of research on the concept of governance. In the sky, the battle between the 5 dragon aspects had come to an end. In the previous battle between the dragon aspects, the lack of a strong vanguard like Alexstrasza gave Nesario an opportunity to chase the 3 dragon aspects who were weaker in melee combat like rabbits. This time, the existence of the Red Dragon Queen made Nesario completely lose the opportunity. Although Alexstrasza was a female dragon, her melee attacks were fierce. Because of the continuous recovery of her body by the power of life, she was the most daring to face Nesario head-on. In the game's standards, she was the strongest main tank, which was also the main tank. She alone attracted almost 70% of Netherio's firepower. Her overwhelming speed and mobility did not belong to Nesario's attack power. Almost every round of attacks, she was able to extract something from the injured black dragon. Even though a lot of her dragon skin and scales had been scratched, as long as Nesario didn't attack the same wound repeatedly, she would automatically recover perfectly in a few minutes. It was not one that looked as weak as paper, but one that had completely replicated the scales of ancient dragons that were impossibly tough to most beings in the world. In a sense, the 5 ancient dragon guardians were all cheating and cheating. Now, it all depended on whose cheat was stronger. Alexstrasza was locked onto her health bar. Nosdorm was an accelerator. Maligos had unlimited firepower. Isra was a rogue software that kept popping up when you were playing the game, making it impossible for you to play happily. Then, what was Nesario's cheat? In the past, Nesario had an anti-damage halo, and his body was covered in acid. Anyone who touched him would die. But now what was Nesario's halo? Duque was not the only one who was curious. The 4 dragon guardians were also nervously speculating about Nesario's backup plan. The once mighty Black Dragon King was already in a miserable state. The experienced Alexstrasza and the unafraid Nosdorm launched a frenzied attack on his left eye that could not open. The wounds on the left side of his body were the most numerous. From the left dragon's neck to his left thigh, not a single part of his body was intact. The armor on the left half of his body that was used to hold his body in place had been torn off, and the lava that erupted from his body was destroying his body. From a human's point of view, Nesario's left arm had almost moved to his scapula. This was because the power that swelled from his body had swelled up on his left chest, causing his dragon body to be severely deformed. No one knew if Nesario's chest would explode in the next moment. Even Alexstrasza, who was not afraid of death, only dared to attack Nasario's left chest with her dragon's tail, and did not dare to pounce on him with her dragon claws. However, the other parts of his body were being attacked by the 4 rogue dragons unscrupulously. Nasario's wings were like a broken kite, full of holes. If he had not used a method similar to magic to make himself float in the air, he would have long fallen to the ground. Apart from the left side, which was the worst, his back, neck, and limbs were all injured to varying degrees. Some were magical, but most were physical. The 4 dragon guardians carefully and skillfully depleted his life force. They did not lack courage, but it was not worth it to sacrifice their lives for this traitor dragon. As time passed, the outcome of the battle in midair was finally decided. In terms of strength, Nasario did not have an advantage against 4 of them. The injuries from the previous battle had seriously affected his speed and defense. After suffering a series of heavy blows, the 4 dragon guardians finally saw an opportunity. It's done. Duque's magic message was transmitted to the spiritual sea of the 4 dragon guardians at the same time. It was because of the system prompt. Deathwing's HP has fallen below 20%, entering the beheading stage. 20% HP was a very delicate point. Entering this stage meant that the target was on the verge of death, and many skills that targeted the dying could be launched. Of course, this also meant that the opponent's final counterattack. The 4 dragon guardians suddenly changed their tactics. Alexstrasza, who had been entangled in close combat, suddenly flew backward. She puffed out her chest and looked like she was about to unleash dragon breath with all her might. However, Nosdormu suddenly pounced forward and entangled Neltharion tightly. Just as Nasario was about to take the long-range attacks of the other 2 dragons and pounce forward to interrupt the red dragon's ultimate move, an accident happened. Isra, who had also been using long-range attacks, suddenly switched to a brand new dream. That dream was of his first mate, Sinestra. To be honest, because of the flames and corrosive liquid all over his body, he did not know how many female black dragons he had killed during mating. He had no feelings for his first mate. He could not accept the illusion that deeply stimulated him. Sinestra was actually destroying the dragon egg that belonged to him. No, Nasario, who was crazy about the dragon egg, paused for a moment. The 4 dragon guardians seized the opportunity and pounced forward. Chapter 6:12. Isra and Malygos suddenly engaged in close combat, which was beyond Nasario's expectations. By the time he came back to his senses, Malygos had already bitten the dragon's neck, which was a little lower than the back of his head. At the same time, Malygos' pair of front claws also bit him. Endless magical power rushed into Neltharion's neck from his neck. And near the black dragon's shoulder, Isra was ferociously gnawing at the back of the neck, a pair of claws pressing down on the wings of Deathwing, similarly infusing the power of the dream world at every point of contact. At this time, Nosdormu, who was the least afraid of death, also pounced. Anyway, this guy's body was made of sand and metal. As long as the power of time contained in the dragon's body was not lost, this guy would not die. He directly gave Nasario a warm hug, and a big mouth of sand and stone bit towards Nasario's right chest ribs. The place that was bitten directly turned into dust and dissipated. Ow 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 ow, Nasario struggled in vain. In his good right eye there was only one existence, Alexstrasza, the life-giver who restrained him the most. Unexpectedly, what she spat out was clearly a crimson dragon breath, but visually, it looked like she was spitting out a strange green flame. That was the color of life. The power to awaken the earth and make thousands of flowers bloom. A condescending dragon breath of life avoided Nosdormu's neck by a hair's breadth, and hit Nasario's left chest heavily. The former Earth Guardian let out the loudest wail since the start of the battle. In the next moment, his dragon blood, which was almost equivalent to super high-temperature flames, burst out from every wound on his body. Originally, this fatal blow could at least seriously injure the 2 dragon guardians behind him. However, Duque shouted, "Disperse!" at the critical moment. This allowed Isra and Malygos to escape. Nosdormu relied on his thick skin and flesh to dodge a little slower. In the end, he was shocked to find that Nasario's dragon blood had actually consumed a considerable part of his power of time. To him, this was his life. Nosdormu suddenly regretted it. Neltharion, who was covered in wounds and spewing dragon blood, plummeted from the sky. He smashed through the clouds like a comet, and crashed into the southern wall of the Rotterdam kingdom. His massive body easily shattered the sturdy wall that even the orc's strongest catapults could not destroy, as if it was a pile of building blocks. The falling black dragon instantly plowed a huge ravine that was more than 100 meters wide and more than a kilometer long on the grass between the southern city wall of Lordaeron and Lake Lordermere. The entire Rotterdam city seemed to be moaning in pain at this moment, and the southern city wall collapsed like dominoes, causing the ground to sink violently. This tremor was like a wave that spread in all directions. The buildings near the city walls let out the most violent explosion sounds before collapsing with a loud bang. This scene was many times more exaggerated than a plane crash. The falling Neltharion continued to advance southward on the wet riverbank like a raging wave. In the face of this terrifying momentum, the big tree that required two people to hug was even more fragile than a matchstick. It was easily broken and sent flying. The fallen Neltharion chewed on the mud in embarrassment while shoveling like a bulldozer from the city wall to Lake Lordermere. A huge wooden pier by the lake that could accommodate the largest battleship of the Alliance was directly smashed, and countless pieces of broken wood flew into the air. Neltharion, on the other hand, crashed into the lake. Bang! There was a thunderous sound. Neltharion's fall stirred up waves that were nearly 100 meters high. When the lake calmed down a little, the entire surface of the lake began to boil because of his ultra-high temperature, as if there was an erupting volcano at the bottom of the lake. The four dragon aspects looked at each other. The big sister, Alexstrasza, was extremely domineering. Drag him up and continue to kill him. Fighting in deep water had never been a wyvern's specialty. Firstly, this was not a true deep sea. Secondly, so what if the lake was more than 10 meters deep? Was the title of the King of Magic just a bluff? Malygos's eyes widened, and his pair of vertical pupils suddenly turned blue. Countless mysterious magic runes poured down from top to bottom in his water tank-sized pupils. A domineering roar reverberated through the entire sky, causing the ears of everyone in Rotterdam to buzz. I declare, this is a world of ice. It was a spectacle that would be unforgettable to any witness for the rest of their lives. It was a miracle that would be sung by every bard for thousands of years. Originally, there was only a thin layer of crushed ice on the surface of the lake, but when a blue and white shock wave spread all the way to the horizon, the crushed ice turned into thick ice. The unparalleled cold penetrated straight to the bottom of the lake, and in a few breaths, all the water within a radius of several kilometers turned into ice. Explode! It was another thunderous roar from Malygos. Crackle, crackle. The lake that had turned into ice suddenly let out a violent explosion, and then all the ice fragments rose into the air in a way that defied gravity, and quickly dissipated in the terrifying winter wind. No one could believe their eyes. Lake Lordermere, which the people of Rotterdam had seen for thousands of years, was gone. In its place was a huge, white pit, and an extremely steep cliff of ice appeared where the horizon should have been. At the bottom of the pit near the original lake, a black dragon that was emitting high heat was moving with difficulty. No, it could already be included in the category of twitching before death. The four cheats, the four dragon aspects, flapped their wings and surrounded him again. East, south, north, and west, all four directions were closely watching Neltharion. It's over. Nesario, your shameless betrayal from 10,000 years ago will finally come to an end today. The Red Dragon Queen made a declaration of victory. For my spouse and my people. Malygos was still furious. You, who have been destroyed in the river of time, will become my trophy, Nosdormu announced proudly. Sleep forever, my brother, Isra said calmly. Duque interrupted. Can you kill him quickly? I'm afraid there will be changes. There can't be any changes. Malygos rudely interrupted Duque's magical transmission. Duque, who was on the balcony of Rotterdam, curled his lips. Then do it. I don't want to fight the same boss 3 times. After blabbering for a while, the 4 dragon aspects finally made their move. They dismembered Nesario, and immediately realized that something was wrong. The surrounding environment was in a trance. Alexstrasza saw Neltharion come back from the dead and crush her eggs. Nosdormu saw the future bronze dragons coming back to attack him and his descendants. Malygos saw the destruction of the blue dragons once again. The 3 dragon aspects woke up at the same time. Isra, what are you doing? No, it's not me. Chapter 6:13. Duque, who was watching this scene through the magic eyes, facepalmed. These silly dragons were still blinded by hatred. If it weren't for the fact that he had to vent the anger in his heart, Nesario would have mastered the Lion Corpse swordsmanship long ago. Although it was reasonable for antagonists to die because they talked too much, from a different perspective, one had to understand that when their grudges that were deeper than the ocean and wider than the sky finally had a chance to be vented, no one would be willing to immediately kill off their opponent. Making a move first and then pretentiously reciting the eulogy was because their hatred wasn't deep enough. If you had been thinking about revenge every minute of every day for 10,000 years, you would definitely be crazier than Maligos, and you would be even more reluctant to kill Nesario immediately. When Nesario betrayed them, Maligos had dragged the entire Blue Dragon Legion to fight to the death. In the end, his wife was killed and a large number of dragon children and grandchildren were wiped out. No one would be able to accept such a thing. Even if Alexstrasza wanted to act quickly, she would be stopped by Maligos. Alright, the one behind it had finally made his move. Enzos, one of the 4 great ancient gods of Azeroth. Of course, it wasn't him personally, but judging from the reactions of the 4 dragon kings, it should be the high elven minister who took the lead in seducing Queen Azhara 10,000 years ago, the future king of nightmares, Savi's. Only he could erode the Emerald Dream controlled by Isra and turn it into the so-called Emerald Nightmare in a short period of time. Just as Savi's attacked through the Emerald Nightmare, directly affecting the 3 dragon aspects and eroding Isra's Emerald Dream, Nesario, who was lying at the bottom of the lake like a corpse, suddenly moved. Like a spring that had been pressed to the extreme, it bounced back violently. A thick black lightning lit up at the bottom of the lake and shot into the sky. It looked like it was going straight for the southern sky. No, Maligos let out the most mournful roar. It was useless. A new wave of nightmares attacked again. Even if Savi's was hiding somewhere to release this move, the power of the nightmares was actually quite limited. Based on the abilities of the dragon aspects, one more wave of nightmares would at most be ineffective. All in all, it would only take 10 seconds at most. But at this juncture, the most critical 10 seconds were too fatal. It was enough to make Deathwing disappear without a trace. Would he be able to find such a good opportunity to deal with him again? Duque couldn't imagine it. However, Duque was unwilling. Weren't the 4 dragon aspects too useless? I've painstakingly schemed and even used my transmigration cheat to set up such a perfect trap, yet you can't even kill Nesario. How am I supposed to continue working with you in the future? Unwilling. Indignant. But so what? Duque's heart was filled with grievance. Aurelia painfully noticed that Duque's fingernails had dug deep into the armrest of the sofa. She knew that even though Duque looked like he was going to watch the show, Duque cared more about Deathwing's life than anyone else. She could clearly feel the faint fear in Duque's heart towards Nesario. Indeed, so what if he had that 1/5 platinum disc for warning? Deathwing's 10,000 years of notoriety was not just for show. If Nesario transformed into a human again and launched a sneak attack on Duque, who could guarantee that the 4 dragon kings would be able to support him in time? Even if they could save Duque, what about Duque's friends and family? What about Duque's territory? What about his subjects? Everything in the secular world was like a sand castle in front of this ferocious and unparalleled evil ancient dragon. To be honest, Duque definitely wanted Nesario to die more than anyone else. Aurelia really didn't want to see Duque, who was pretending to be relaxed, immersed in pain and fear. However, what could a mere mortal do? This wasn't something mortals could intervene in. At this moment, Duque suddenly noticed a small black dot above Nesario's forward airspace. It was a griffin. On the griffin there was a man in golden armor. He was holding the golden Bible in his left hand and doing something that he had repeated thousands of times. He was praying. His armor was very different from the armor of the Knights of Rotterdam and any other country on the continent. Its right pauldron was a huge golden wing, and its right arm under the pauldron was carrying an incomparably heavy warhammer. The griffin he was riding let out a dissatisfied cry, complaining that he was too heavy. He completed his prayer and smiled at the griffin. "Big guy, after I go down you can go back on your own. I should be dead for sure." There was no fear or uneasiness about death. There was only devotion to his faith. Along with his farewell words, the griffin seemed to feel the determination of its temporary master. It let out a low cry as if wanting him to give up on this terrible idea. However, he ignored it. Bright golden light descended from above and enveloped the entire set of heavy white armor with golden edges. Soon, regardless of whether the armor was originally white, blue or any other color, it all began to glow with golden light. He suddenly disappeared from the back of the griffin. He plummeted. His hammer, his armor, and his light merged into one, forming a dazzling golden comet. The comet was heading in the direction of Nesario's escape route. If there were no accidents, 2 rays of light, one black and one gold, would meet in midair in 3 seconds. Even though he was seriously injured, Nesario still had enough agility to avoid the paladin who jumped down from the sky to seek death. However, Nesario refused to dodge. That's right. The 4 dragon kings can chase after me, Deathwing. How dare you, a mere human, stop me, the true overlord of the sky? Nesario did not dodge. Instead, he opened his mouth and bit down. The walls of Rotterdam collapsed. At least 100,000 people in the city witnessed this scene, and almost everyone called out the name of this alliance hero. Uther. This great paladin once again showed the world his unparalleled courage. Not everyone had the courage to jump from a height of 1,000 meters. Not everyone had the courage to face the Deathwing head-on. Not everyone had the courage to face death generously. He dared to because his name was Uther. Without any suspense, the incomparably bright holy light in the eyes of humans was sent flying by Nesario. However, he bought himself 2 seconds. 2 precious seconds. But it was not enough. Aurelia was horrified to find that the person she loved the most had disappeared from her side. No one knew why Duque could teleport behind Uther in an instant. Anyway, under the watchful eyes of the entire city, a huge fist formed by arcane energy suddenly appeared. With an incomparably gorgeous right hook, it went through Nesario's blind spot and punched the black dragon's ugly face. Nesario, big. Nesario felt dizzy. When he came back to his senses, the 4 dragon aspects pounced on him again. By the time he came back to his senses, the 4 dragon aspects had pounced on him again. This time no one could save Nesario. Chapter 6:14. Ever since his fall, Nesario had done countless sinister things in his life. He had been a traitor, betrayed his brothers, murdered his entire family, massacred cities with dragon breath, and killed many female black dragons. Perhaps he had thought of retribution, but he never thought that it would come from the insignificant race that he despised the most and should be erased from the entire planet, humans. To be specific, that guy was called Duke Marcus. Ever since he failed to control Duque with his dragon scales and caused the 4 dragon aspects to hunt him down, he hated Duque. While he was seriously injured and unable to fight, he tried to sneak into the upper echelons of the alliance and obtain the identity of a king. It wasn't as if he didn't have the intention to trick Duque. It was just that he really didn't think that he would be tricked instead of being tricked. If he didn't bother to dodge Uther's attack, then Duque, who suddenly jumped out of the spatial rift behind Uther, was an attack that he couldn't dodge even if he wanted to. As an ancient dragon king with rich combat experience, after he was temporarily blinded, he kept swinging his head to trade time for space so that his right eye could see more things. This indirectly reduced the blind spot of his left eye. This was a very smart approach. Even Alexstrasza couldn't completely avoid his constantly changing and omnidirectional vision, but Duque managed to do it. The gigantic fist that was formed by countless arcane blast punched over. If it was an ordinary hook, this blow would never have hit him. It should be said that even the arm of a giant couldn't hit Nesario easily. His unparalleled combat instincts allowed him to dodge any simple direct attack. However, the essence of Duque's punch was magical energy. In midair, this hook followed the movement of Nesario's dragon head, changing directions 18 times in less than a second. The fist kept blasting towards the left side of his face. This is impossible. Nesario screamed in despair in his heart. The Black Dragon King knew very well that the paladin's attack just now was harmless. However, Duque's attack was definitely different. If such a rich magical power blasted his wound, it would definitely make him dizzy and miss his last chance to escape. No, Neltharion was terrified. He was terrified. In despair, he sent out a mysterious spiritual imprint towards a certain direction in the void. It was for the ancient god Enzoth, and it contained the will of Nesario's absolute submission to Enzoth. Unfortunately, it was like a stone sinking into the sea. He immediately realized that Enzos would only attack once. If he couldn't seize this opportunity, he would be abandoned. No, it shouldn't be like this. He immediately made a second move and sent a thought to Duque. That was not an attack. After failing to control Duque the last time, he knew very well how shocking Duque's mental defense was. That was begging for mercy. No, don't hit me. All he had to do was shift his fist a little and I would be safe. I will be forever grateful to you. I can give you all the treasures I've accumulated for 10,000 years. All right, give me this first to show your sincerity. Duque quickly sent the item he wanted back as a thought. Nesario decisively gave it away. It wasn't his thing anyway. In the face of his life, everything else was fleeting. After receiving the item, Duque suddenly shouted in the spiritual world. Neltharion, you lied to me? Uh, I didn't lie to you. Time seemed to freeze. Neltharion was dumbfounded. Yes, he had lied to countless people. He had lied to his brothers, his spouse, his children, and his boss. He had lied to everything. Only this time, in order to show his sincerity, he had given him the real thing. What? Without giving Neltharion time to react, Duque's fist had already arrived. An incomparably gorgeous purple-blue arcane energy fist landed on Neltharion's ugly face. His face, which had already been badly mutilated by Nozdormu's hammer in his human form, was further hit by the concussive force. Even someone as strong as Neltharion felt a violent wave of dizziness. The body of the dragon, which was originally flying at high speed, turned its head backward and its body forward. It suddenly looked a little like an overturned tortoise. It was very funny. How many seconds did Duque buy for the 4 dragons? 3 seconds? Or 4 seconds? No one could tell how much it was. They only knew that it was enough. The 4 dragon aspects were ashamed of their mistakes. They focused all their attention and spirit, and as they charged forward at high speed, they did their best to resist Savi's incubus power. There was no hesitation. There was no mercy. They risked the possibility of a final backlash and fiercely pounced forward. The most violent one was naturally Maligos, whose wife and child had died. He accurately bit the place he had bitten before. At the spine that seemed to have been broken in half at the back of the head, she bit and wantonly released the power of magic. Isra and Nozdormu changed their strategy. They began to destroy Neltharion's wings with all their might. Alexstrasza, on the other hand, attacked Neltharion's chest with all her might. Finally, after more than 20 seconds, Neltharion let out the last and strongest scream of his life. Roar! In the next moment, Neltharion, the wing of death, was beheaded. After flapping his wings dozens of times, Maligos, the king of magic, flew higher into the sky. He then made a sudden descent and flew to the original south gate of Rotterdam in one breath. At this moment, hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians saw the huge, ugly, and hideous black dragon head on Maligos's left front claw. Ah. Did you see that? Did you see that Nesario has finally died at the hands of me, Maligos? Maligos' blood flowed with the thrill of revenge and satisfaction. This pleasure turned into thousands of bubbles that rushed to his brain, almost burning it to the point of melting. The taste of successful revenge is so sweet. In a trance, he saw that his former partner seemed to be smiling at him in that world. Maligos was so pleased that he actually had the thought to do a few somersaults in the air. Then, without looking back, he carried Neltharion's head and flapped his wings to fly further north. This guy. Alexstrasza muttered in dissatisfaction. Nozdormu cursed, bastard Maligos. He destroyed my collection. This is not a replica refined from the river of time. This is the real thing of that great traitor Neltharion? Isra laughed. Forget it. When Maligos is done venting his anger, you can ask him for it back. On the other side, Alexstrasza glanced at the sky below and muttered, This kid Duque is in the limelight. Yes. After Maligos flew away, everyone looked at the 2 people in the sky. Chapter 6:15. 30 seconds ago, Uther had been sent flying. Perhaps it could be said that he had overestimated himself, but in order to carry out justice, Uther did not have the slightest bit of regret when he swooped down from the sky until he was sent flying. Holy light! If you hear my prayers, please respond to me. Please punish this most evil dragon in the world with death. As if hearing the call in his heart, Uther saw a shining blue portal as he fell from the sky. A mage? Who was so brave as to teleport in midair? Was he not afraid of not using the slow fall spell properly and falling to pieces in midair? In the next moment he saw the crazy mage. Duque. Sure enough, only he had the courage. Uther had seen many mages, but Duque was the only one who completely subverted his impression of mysterious people. Courage, fearlessness, sacrifice, justice. Those qualities that only the most devout paladin had were all seen in this young man who was supposed to be hiding in the back and safely releasing magic. Sure enough, only such a young man is the hope of the future of mankind. Wuther looked up at the sky with his mouth wide open. When Nesario became as small as a fist in his field of vision, he saw Duke punch the black dragon's cheek with his magic power, and then the 4 dragon aspects rushed forward. Is that so? Then I have no regrets. Uther closed his eyes. This was 1,000 meters in the sky. Uther had no means to save himself. Even the Holy Shield spell could not. Because the Holy Shield spell could prevent any damage from hitting the paladin directly, but it could not offset the terrifying impact of falling from the sky. The impact of falling from 1,000 meters in the sky could not even be withstood by a dragon with the strongest body, let alone a mere mortal body. It was inevitable that he would be smashed into meat paste. 1 second. 2 seconds. 5 seconds. Uther instinctively felt that something was wrong. Was that a sound? When Uther opened his eyes again in surprise, he saw Duque, whose arms were folded and facing the ground, approaching him at a faster speed. How is this possible? Uther couldn't help but cry out. Of course, he didn't know what gravitational acceleration was, and he also didn't know that when a person's limbs were spread out parallel to the ground, there would be greater air resistance when falling, and the falling speed would decrease. Duque was getting closer and closer. When Duque was 50 feet away from Uther, he suddenly stretched out his hand. In the next second, Uther felt himself being wrapped up by a strange small tornado, and the speed at which he was falling suddenly decreased. His heart had almost jumped out of his chest, but he was now floating down. Is this slow fall technique? No. This should be some kind of unknown power. No matter what, he seemed to have survived. Thank the holy light. When he heard that Uther had been saved, the first thing he shouted was thanks to the holy light. Duque almost gave up on the idea of saving him. Thank the holy light? I'm the one who saved you. Duque scolded. I thank you as well, but the fact that I'm alive is definitely the will of the holy light. Duque slapped his forehead. I'm so mad. He suddenly understood why Uther's holy light power was so off the charts. In a sense, even the strongest holy knight was suffering from a deep delusional disorder. He glanced at the distance between Uther and the dry lake bottom. There were still 20 feet. If Uther fell like this, he would probably die 70% of the time. Duque suddenly let out a very fake scream. Not good. The magic is not working. With that, he removed the storm power from Uther's body. This holy Saya, who was glowing with golden light, fell from a height of about 7 stories. Bang! The dumbfounded Uther fell to the bottom of the frozen lake with his arms and legs wide open. What a beautiful scene. The shameless Duque gloated in the air. Unexpectedly, the strongest holy knight Uther, who was known as the unkillable cockroach, got up just like that. He spat out a mouthful of blood and raised his head to look at Duke. With a serious expression he said, Although I am very grateful for your kindness in saving my life, and I also admire your courage and commanding skills, it seems that your magic level still needs to be improved. This was not mockery or mockery. This was Uther seriously giving advice to Duque. F***ck, 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 F***ck. Duque looked as if he had eaten a fly. As expected, religious zealots were all crazy. If you tried to compare intelligence with a crazy person, they would only drag your intelligence to the same level and then use their rich experience to defeat you. Damn, luckily you're not from Stormwind City. Duque admired Uther's character from the bottom of his heart. As the most noble character of an era, Uther was fully deserving of that title. But whether to be friends with him or play happily with him was another matter. Slowly descending to Uther's side, Duque finally squeezed out a smile. Let's return in triumph, Uther. Shall we go together? Okay. The big hand in the silver gauntlet shook Duque's hand tightly. Can you not use so much force when shaking hands? Sorry. It was a triumphant return. This time, it was truly a triumphant return in every sense of the word. Although there were many twists and turns, and although there was a very unpleasant episode, no matter what, the fall of an evil dragon that had scourged the world for tens of thousands of years was something to be celebrated. When they saw Duque and Uther walk up from the bottom of the frozen lake and walk to the shore, the whole of Lordaeron was boiling with excitement. You guys are amazing. Well done. You are indeed true heroes. Long live the dragon slayer Duque. Long live the light envoy Uther. Who was it that deserved the cheers of hundreds of thousands of people? Who could ignore national boundaries and races and be worshipped by people all over the world? Since ancient times, there was only one kind of person who could enjoy such treatment. This kind of person was called a hero. When Nesario's acid enveloped the entire city, and all the mortals were powerless to do anything, when the evil dragon that easily destroyed hundreds of meters of the city wall was about to escape, when punishing evil failed and the righteous and kind people were worried that they would be retaliated against in the future, who was it that stopped the terrifying Black Dragon King that transcended the mortal world? It was Uther. It was Duke Marcus. Some kings reigned for decades and history books might not necessarily record their names. Some heroes fought bravely for dozens of seconds, but history books were destined to have a very thick page. This was a hero. A hero who, as a mortal, had done a feat that transcended the mortal world. Duque. Sasha, who rushed out of the city, rushed up, and so did Aurelia. Servanas watched quietly from behind. She suddenly realized that it was already very difficult to find a hero as a partner like her own sisters. It was even more difficult to find a great hero who surpassed Duque as a partner. Chapter 6:16. Lordaeron City was in an uproar, and cheers rose and fell like a tsunami, lasting for a long time. It was precisely because he didn't have the guts that people praised Uther's true courage. It was precisely because he couldn't do it that everyone eulogized the magnificence of Duque's magic fist. People cried and laughed as they jumped and hopped in every corner of the southern part of the city, welcoming the triumphant return of the hero with the most enthusiastic voices. That's right, the main force behind the death of the Wing of Death, Nesario, was the 4 ancient dragon aspects. However, didn't they see that if it weren't for the 2 of them, the cunning Black Dragon King would have escaped successfully? Moreover, the rule since ancient times was that those who participated in the Battle of the Dragon Slayers were qualified to be called a Dragon Slayer. Do you think it's easy to hide from the dragon's breath? The layman watched the show while the expert observed the artistry. After witnessing the earth-shattering battle between the 5 dragons, one would know how terrifying the Black Dragon King was. The bodies of the Dragon Kings were already huge enough. Their defensive power was so high that it could be said to be insane. No one had thought that a dragon aspect would be so agile in the air. It was like an elephant using its shadowless kick and tap dancing at a speed of 30 times per second in front of you. It was simply unimaginable. Even if Nesario was disabled, how strong was Duque who could effectively hit and injure Nesario? Not all the higher-ups of the Alliance had personally fought alongside Duque, but at this moment, every king was moved. Especially Daelin Proudmoore, who had worked with Duque once at the Palatine Bay, but at that time he was also busy fighting against the sword sage hero of the tribe, Samuro. Under the threat of an opponent of that level, how could he have the spare time to watch Duque's battle? This time he finally saw it and he was shocked. Dai Lin secretly made a decision when he saw his beloved daughter Jaina rushing out of the sanctuary and jumping with the cheering crowd. People kept coming to greet Duque and Uther, who were returning in triumph. It was like a continuation of the triumphant return ceremony. No, it should be said that the previous triumphant return that was supposed to be a show of the Rotterdam Kingdom was overshadowed by their heroic performance. It was as if their triumphant return was the real triumph. Tyrion Fordring and the others got down from the griffins. The paladins had scattered to different parts of the city to see if there were any emergencies. They welcomed Uther eagerly. Many kings came. Magni complained to Duque, "You're really not a good friend. You should have teleported me with you. Then I could have performed a real, deity descends, in front of Deathwing." "Forget it. Every time I take you for a ride on the Griffin, you always say that you're busy with military affairs. Falling from the sky? It would be strange if you didn't pee." Cudrin mercilessly exposed his distant relative's lies. "This is a dream. It's a dream, right?" Master Craftsman Jurban rubbed his chin. "If it wasn't for you, Duque, Uther would have been dead. I'm considering whether to equip every Griffin Knight with a high-altitude escape device." Duque's facial muscles twitched. It had to be said that in Azeroth, where technology was rampant, there really were a lot of engineering equipment for jumping off buildings. At this time, most of the kings and representatives of the Alliance had arrived. "Where's Xeon?" Lang secretly asked Salas. King Salas replied angrily, "He's still in the cave." Antonidas whispered to everyone, "Princess Kalia seems to have died. Tyrinas is grieving." Salas was stunned. Wasn't it Duque who saved the princess? After that, Duque handed the princess over to a group of royal guards. A few minutes later, unfortunately, the princess was hit by a ball of acid. "That's a pity." The kings all sighed softly. No one knew that the beautiful princess in their hearts had already begun her journey around the world. At this time, the crowd around Duque suddenly parted. Even Tyrinas wouldn't have received such treatment if he had come personally. There was only one person who could make the kings give way, Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonso's Fail. Praise the Holy Light. Looking at Uther, who was kneeling on one knee, Alonso showed a satisfied expression. Uther was indeed the disciple he admired the most. The only one who could perfectly combine the Holy Light with combat was Uther. The new profession that he had created on a whim had now become the mainstay of the Alliance. "This is all the guidance of the Holy Light." Uther bowed his head deeply. Alonso's walked over and stopped in front of Duque. He smiled and said, "The two of you worked together to defeat the Wing of Death, and the world was inspired. This time, in order to better spread the holy light and courage in the world, may I ask if you can give a portion of this achievement to Uther?" Duque was stunned and then smiled. "Without Uther's cover, I would not have been able to hit Nethario at all. This is only natural. Thank you for your generosity." Alonso's walked towards his disciple. "The holy light gives people supreme courage. Uther, my disciple, you have used your fearless actions to prove the meaning of your existence and the holy lights. So, in order to commend your courage in front of the kings and the politicians of the Alliance, I propose to grant you the title of Emissary of Light. You can use it as your surname." Wow. This was really a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. The Archbishop of the Holy Light personally made a proposal in front of the kings. This was a very impressive thing. Several kings were so shocked that they even lost their composure. However, everyone immediately felt relieved. Not everyone had the courage to launch a suicidal charge against 200,000 orcs with just 12 riders. Not everyone had the courage to jump down from the sky and smash the seemingly weak warhammer at the Black Dragon King. What was courage? Obviously, Uther was the well-deserved embodiment of courage. Duque had proven himself countless times, and this time, Duque attacked Nethario after Uther. Although Duque's blow was more important, he was not the first to charge after all. In terms of courage, Duque was obviously a notch inferior. Therefore, there was nothing wrong with Alonso's doing this. Moreover, he still had to advertise for the Church of Holy Light. Duque was the first to shout, "Agreed." Agreed. We all agree. The Dark Portal, Year 2, December 25th. On this day, two names became sacred. One was the well-known deputy commander of the Alliance, Duke Marcus. He was recognized and allowed to be crowned with the title of Dragon Slayer. The other was Uther. After this day, he went from being an ordinary paladin from an ordinary family with no surname to Uther the Emissary of Light. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.